Excellent, thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone to the June 9th Landmarks Commission meeting. It's great to see everybody, even if it is just virtually. In compliance with notification requirements of Ohio Open Meeting Law and Section 101.021 of the Codified Ordinances of Cleveland, Ohio, 1976, notice of this meeting has been publicly posted. All boards and commissions under the purview of the City Planning Department conducts its meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by voice vote. Abstentions from any vote due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to taking of any vote. In order to ensure that everyone participating in the meeting has the opportunity to be heard, we ask that you keep your mic on mute. We then ask you to use the raised hand function before asking a question or making a comment. The raised hand feature can be found in the participants panel on the desktop and mobile versions and activated by clicking the hand icon. Please wait for the chair or facilitator to recognize you and be sure to select unmute and announce yourself before speaking. When finished speaking, please lower your hand by clicking on the raised hand icon again and muting your microphone. We will also be utilizing the chat feature to communicate with participants. The chat feature can be activated by clicking the chat button located on the bottom of the WebEx screen. Call-in users can unmute by using *6. All meeting activities are being recorded via the WebEx platform. These proceedings are also being live streamed via YouTube. All requests to speak on a particular matter via our website and email have been considered. We have also received email from those who have provided written comment on a particular matter. I'd like to call the June 6, 2022 Landmarks meeting to order. Mr. Pettit, please call roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Bonezzi.
Here.
Mr. Kalikia.
Here.
Mr. Dreyer.
Here.
Mr. Edmond.
Here.
Director Wong. Mr. Strickland.
Here.
Mr. Tarasik.
Here.
Ms. Trott.
Here.
We are also joined today by Kevin Roberts from the Department of Law, and Carl Brunges of our staff is hosting the meeting. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Excellent. We will begin with our certificates of appropriateness. And we will be welcome our first applicant to unmute your mic, announce yourself, and tell us about your project. The first applicant is located at the Summer Building at 2104 West 25th Street, storefront renovation for Dave's Hot Chicken.
Hi, my name is Nicholas Celia. I'm with Dave's Hot Chicken, and this is our project. Okay, so this is on the corner of Chatham and West 25th, directly across the street from the new Intro complex. And we are a Nashville hot chicken style restaurant, which is like a dry rub instead of a sauce hot chicken. And this would be our second location in the Cleveland area. Our first is in Lakewood. And what we are looking to do with the building is essentially return the storefront to somewhat of what you see in this photo that you have up right now, where we have two large storefronts with, not split up large glass panes, and then a recessed doorway in the middle with paneling at the knee wall. We've already been through with the Ohio City people and gotten their approval on this. We have only the first floor, and the building is not exactly the way that you see in this photo. There's an addition that's on the back now. Yeah, there you go. And there's a building next door that it's part of the owners own it, but we won't be utilizing that part of it. We're only in the multi-story part. What would you like to know about it? This is my first such meeting, so I'm not sure what you guys are looking for.
Sure. Sorry about that. I was muted. Please continue on. Show us your full design, and then we will ask questions here afterwards.
Okay, if you can scroll to some of the design drawings that are in there. That would be great. There you go. So, essentially the back will be kitchen, storage, mechanical, like that sort of thing. There's not much of interest probably to you guys there other than to know that, the plans are all being correctly done from a structural standpoint. The front that's the side view right there. We are leaving the Cleveland mural that's on the side. That's a pretty big tourist draw and a great asset for the community. So we figured we would be leaving that. If you look on the right-hand side, there is a glass panel below the sign, and that is currently blocked off, boarded over from the previous, it was a furniture store. That will get opened back up to look like its original layout, the way it was originally done. And then if you can get to the front, you can see that this pretty closely matches what the original photo looked like, where you have large panes of glass on either side with a central door. It'll be recessed back a little bit, and paneled knee wall along the front. Everything will be in black aluminum, which we think is probably the most period correct color. And Mullions, the aluminum storefront glass system, will be matching in black aluminum. We have the signage is a channel letter sign on the front, with a round logo sign on the side and a blade sign, which we think is a little more historically accurate for this age. There would have been a lot of blade signs at the time, on the southeastern corner of the building. In these drawings, our architect threw in the second floor glass just to make everything look complete, but that isn't ours. The landlord has intentions to lease that out, and it would be renovated as part of whatever he does with that.
Excellent. That is very helpful. Do you have additional things to present, or does that conclude your presentation?
Unless someone else from our project wants to chime in with something that I'm missing, I think that's the extent of it. It's not a huge project. It's not super complicated. We really just want to stay true to the nature of Ohio City and to the period. And I think we've achieved that.
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation. Just for clarification for everyone, it's just first floor only are your renovations that you just stated, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, then we will begin with feedback from the local design review committee.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is Nate Law with Ohio City Incorporated. This was seen at the last design review meeting. It was approved with the conditions that the knee wall color and detail would be presented to Landmarks, which they've done. And also the applicants are going through SRP for the signs, so signage was not presented for approval. So that's important to note. And as the applicant stated, the second floor windows are not part of the approval as well. And that's all we have. Thank you.
Thank you for that summary. I'm just trying to see, do we have Councilman present with us today? I didn't see him, but often do. No, I do not think so. Okay, so then we will open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Mr. Edmond?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate what you're doing with the storefront, and particularly opening back up that glazed area to this on the south facade. And I agree that I think that the black color is probably quite appropriate here. I do have one question about the signage. So there's the lettered sign on the front, the channel letters, there's the blade sign, and then there's also the surface mounted sign on the south facade. Do you think you need both the blade sign and the surface mounted round logo sign? Or do you think the blade sign would be enough for you?
Well, I mean, any business is going to come on here and tell you that they want as much signage as possible. That's just, what we always hope for. We think that they serve two sort of different purposes. The blade sign is a little more ornamental. It's much smaller than the other one. I think that, that was more of an aesthetic choice to add that. I would like to have both, I guess is what I'm saying. If you guys are going to put your foot down on it, then I think we need to think about it and decide which one is the one that is the most useful to us. But we love both. I mean, I don't think it looks bad. You know.
Thanks. That's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Redmond. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to say this is a huge improvement over what is there right now. So I really welcome opening up the first floor and the windows. You had a wonderful photograph of original conditions, a nice vintage photograph with a lot of detail. In fact, it looks like somebody went in and did some retouch to make the detail more observable. In this photograph, the doors to, at that time, 2 storefronts are recessed.
Yes.
Are your doors going to be recessed? It's hard to see from the rendering.
Yeah, if you scroll down, you can see that there
Okay.
is, you can see that they notch in, and then there's double doors,
Nice.
and then there's a vestibule for weather protection.
Okay, all right. Yeah, and I'm fine with the black color. It'd probably be nice to see a little more articulation on the columns. You know, reminiscent of what is in that original photograph. I'd like to see that, but overall, like I say, this is a refreshing improvement. It's going to really change the feel of that corner. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Tarasik? And just to remind everyone, we're not voting on signage. It's just the renovation work at this time.
Madam Chair.
Feedback.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to echo the comments of my fellow commission members, and also want to note, I see Tara Petrus made a comment that she was thrilled to hear the mural is staying, as am I. And my question to that is, because I don't know, what condition is that mural in? I'm very happy it's staying as well, but what condition is that in?
It's not too bad. The last time I took a look at it, and there may be a more recent photo in that. A lot of the photos in that deck are a little bit older, but I looked at it just a few days ago, and it didn't strike me as being needing retouching or anything like that. I have no idea who the original artist was or what the history is behind the mural. I didn't really know about it until we started looking at this property. You know, if the city knows who, I assumed that it was part of like a larger mural project, and if the city has records of who did it, and you know, if it needs retouching, maybe we get in contact with them. But I thought it looked okay.
If I could speak to that. This is Tara Petrus, the public art coordinator for the city and city planning staff. The mural was actually done by a group called Graffiti Heart. There were several local artists, but I believe the lead artist on that was Victor Ving. The mural was installed back in 2015. And the last I saw it was in decent condition. It's just the building paint around it is peeling, but the mural was in decent condition the last time I saw it also. And I'm glad to hear it staying, because the original information we had gotten a few years ago was that it was going to be gone. So I'm going to thank you guys for that. But I can put you in touch with Graffiti Heart if you feel like there needs to be any touch-ups, and they can connect you with the original muralist.
Okay, that'd be cool. We our entire interior design is graffiti art. So we have a team that comes in and hand graffitis the entire interior of the space as sort of like a Los Angeles street art style on the walls and ceiling on the interior. So this ties in really well with what we're doing. So we love it. So it's fantastic.
I'll put my email in the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Petrus. My feedback on this is I do agree this is a great improvement for the building. I do like what you're doing in restoring the close to the original design, as close as possible, but meeting your needs. My only question would be related to your door and door height. In the original image that you showed and shared, the doors were the full height up to the transom bar. And I was wondering if there's a reason why you used a shorter door. Like you're doing everything right. I think if you could increase the door, it would just even strengthen, the restoration that you're trying to do here.
Well, do we have, I'm trying to see down the list of who's here from the landlord. The landlord's work on this project is actually the storefront. So I do need to coordinate with them on any choices that we make. I get your point. It's valid. I have a feeling that probably they drew it using just standard doors, specifically from a cost standpoint, because there are standard door heights and they are cheaper than going custom. I would have to get together with the landlord and ask them about that because that would fall under their costs. And so I can't give you an answer whether I could just say, oh yeah, we'll do that, but we can certainly look into it. I get your point.
I would highly recommend it because I think that you're trying to go back to the original, and that's one of those details that will either make or break the renovation that you're doing here. Related to the bulkhead or the knee wall below your storefronts, in your image to the left, it looks like you have recessed panels to emulate the wood design that was there, but in your sections to the right, I don't see those. What are the details there for that bulkhead, knee wall for the storefront?
I'm sorry, on which part?
Carl, could you point? Yeah, right there. There you go. Perfect.
Well, it's hard to do this without being able to point to the same thing you guys are pointing at. In the detail drawing, that's just the that's just like the structural aspects of it, like how the windows are mounted and all of that. The paneling, as far as I understand, is more like kind of like the way tin ceilings used to be. It's just a panel that goes on the front of what you've done. So I don't think it would be exhibited on there because that's more of a structural drawing, that cross section, the wall section. If we need to add it to something, we certainly can to get it through you guys. Obviously, they're on the the rendering, and we intend them to be there. If we need to change a drawing to satisfy you guys, we certainly can.
Carl, can you flip back to the original picture? And you can see how that just conveys through the black and white. I personally think that detail would once again really strengthen the renovation and achieve what you collectively are trying to, which is to go back to close to the original design. I do like the black color. I do like how you are painting the detail above in the storefront black and carrying that across and reestablishing the window on the south side also. And then related to the signage, I would agree with the comment that was made. I think we should, when you come back, I would encourage you to pick one, the blade sign or the surface applied sign, because I think they're fighting each other, right next to each other, anyone coming up 25th Street. I personally like the blade sign because I do think that adds a lot and takes it down a pedestrian scale. Since you do have the larger one, that is across the front of the building.
Would you be opposed if we used only the blade sign to making it larger?
I'd be open to that. I mean, obviously larger is a very open word. So depending on how large you would want to take it.
I would prefer the same size as the way the side sign is now on the blade, which is, I believe, a 5 foot.
I would want to see it in context because I think the scale is, you don't want to over burden all the signage in the building itself.
Sure.
So that would just be my feedback. So when you come back, I would encourage you to continue to look at that. All right, Mr. Edmond, did you have additional comments or have?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since I was the one who brought up the two signs, I would agree that between the two, the blade sign adds more interest. It kind of goes along with all the kind of commercial signage that's up and down the street here. A quick note on the condition of the mural. Just looking at Google Earth Street View from August 2021, it looks like, and actually keep this image up because that's helpful. So it looks like the mural, wherever it's painted on the brick, is in good condition, but there are those 4 windows that have been infilled with panels, and it looks like those may need a little touch up or work. So I think it's worth having someone look at the mural, because it looks generally good, but there's a couple areas that might need a little work. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any additional questions or comments, or would someone like to make a motion? Mr. Whitman? Oh, or Ms. Anderson?
I move that we approve this project with the stipulation that the applicant installs the full height door that goes up to the transom, and that the bulkhead panels are in fact recessed.
Thank you for that motion with those conditions. Do we have a second?
Madam Chair, I'll second.
Thank you for the second, Mr. Tarasik. Any further discussion? Mr. Edmund?
Go ahead.
A question, is the motion that the door height increase is a requirement or a recommendation?
I'm having it as a requirement.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Edmund? Okay. Any further discussion?
If you don't mind, I would just like to get some clarification on the panel, the knee wall paneling recess that you guys are asking for, because I need to go back and ask specifically. And I haven't been through this process with an organization like yours, so I don't want to do the wrong thing.
No problem.
So when you say that the paneling by recess, do you just mean that it has three-dimensionality to it? Like there's areas that are raised and areas that are not raised? Or do you want it set back from the plane of the window? What exactly does that mean?
Not areas that are raised and not raised, they don't have to be set back from the plane of the window per se. Parts of it might be, but we're talking inches.
So just that the paneling is three-dimensional in some aspect. The stainless
Correct.
steel that will be used will have will be out further in some areas and in
Yes.
further in others.
Yes,
Okay.
so it's not all flush. So it's
Okay.
somewhat, you can kind of see from the drawing that there is some dimensionality to it.
Yeah, it looks like the original might have like been molding on top of a wood panel sort of situation, something like that. So
Yeah, that's how it looks to me too.
Absolutely.
okay, I'm just taking some notes.
All right, thank you. Mr. Brunches, before I move on, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to note one other thing about the doors is they also have the paneling at the bottom as well. It looks like it came across there versus what's being proposed, which may help with tying it all in together, bringing it across at the knee wall level. Thank you.
So both those requirements, once you talk to your landlord, can be brought back to staff.
Okay.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Pettit, please call roll and announce results.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bonezzi,
Yes.
Mr. Colicchia,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Edmund,
Yes.
Director Wong, Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik,
Yes.
Ms. Trott.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion carries unanimously.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to seeing your project progress and seeing you come back with your final signage.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next applicant, Sign for Urgent Care and Health Express at the Shops on Pearl, located at 3762 Pearl Road. The applicant's welcome to unmute your mic, announce yourself, and tell us about your project.
Good morning. My name is Shadi Al-Muqdad from Neon on Signs. We're proposing to install channel letters at 3762 Pearl Road. And as you see, the channel letters is mounted on a 2-inch by 2-inch raceway with red faces and white trim around the letters. And there is one on the front of the building. If you can scroll down.
We need to look at the context to assist in showing yours. So I'm just going to scroll through these
Yeah.
slowly and then get to your presentation portion.
Right. Yeah, here you go. Yeah, one set on the front of the building and one on the side of the building. And it's just the standard LED channel letters mounted on a raceway.
All right. Any additional portions of the presentation?
No,
Just
that's it.
summarize everything. Okay, thank you. We'll begin then with feedback from the local design review committee.
Madam Chair, this did not go to the design review committee. I just want to give the commission some background. When this shopping center was constructed in 1993, the commission approved a set of sign guidelines for all the buildings, with the intent that every sign wouldn't have to come back to the commission, but only in the event that either the sign doesn't meet the criteria or the guidelines, or if there's an issue. Staff reviewed this presentation and determined that the current application doesn't meet the guidelines. I think we have a feeling that although the urgent care sign says it's 24 inches high, it seems overscaled in that location. We once approved a sign for Blockbuster Video across the center of that building, and it fit with between those two piers, the outside edges of those two piers. So I'm not sure that the rendering is accurate in that sense. We also approved only 2 colors for the shopping center, and that would be red or white. We have made, there have been some variation over the years, but I will leave it to the commission to judge this one on its merits. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Pettit. Then we will open up the floor to see if we have councilmen here also. No. Then we will open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Who would like to start us off? Mr. Edmond.
One comment and a question. Just looking at, sort of zooming in on the facade, that appears to be a 24-inch pier. The vertical brick piers, but just based on looking at the bricks, which would mean that the rendering is not entirely accurate in terms of the scale of the letters. It looks like they're rendered as a little bit bigger than 24 inches. And then this is maybe not what we're actually looking at here today, but I did have a question. Is the urgent care, I assume that's a new tenant here. Is there any intention to do some repairs or updating to the awnings? It looks like some of the condition of the awnings are not that great. Thank you.
Does the applicant have any feedback on the awnings?
Well, no, I don't know. I can present that to the landlord if they would like to replace the fabric on the awnings.
How about the scale? Like, talk to us about the scale. How did you determine that scale versus, is that accurate? Like, did you measure this to?
No, it's not. Like the picture was sent to us, and we just put the signage on there, and it's not up to scale, but the signs will be, like the one on the side of the building, like the Health Express, it'd be 18 inches high, and urgent care on the bottom of it, it'd be 24 inches, 24 inches high. And if you look on the bottom, like the bottom of the where the awning is, I believe, like the awning is about, like 20, like about 22 feet wide or 21 feet wide. So we just put that sign right over the awning, and so the sign will be noticeable, because like if during the summertime, like there is trees there, like the branches will block it. That's why we lowered it down to be right and over the awning. But it will be, like a 24-inch by 21 feet. So, but on the drawings, it's looking at it now, like it's not accurate, like it's not up to scale.
Okay.
And also,
Go ahead.
and also the one on the front, like I don't know who just mentioned they had some Blockbuster company in there before. I don't know if they had all that side, like if you see, like like it's all one business, like it's not, like if you look on the other side of the building, the shopping center, where they have like 3 businesses in there, the laundromat, the Chinese food, and the smoke shop. But on this side, like it's only gonna be one business. Like that's why we just put that sign there. They didn't want it on the side of, like, to the left of the building. They didn't want it mounted there. They want it in the center of the building.
Right. Okay. Miss Anderson, you had additional questions?
More comments. I'm glad to see there's something going into the space, because I believe it's vacant now, and I think this is something that I'm sure the community will utilize. Mr. Pettit brought up that the Blockbuster video sign fit in between the piers of the that bay where the doors are located. So I think we should at best mimic that. And I noticed in the current conditions that there are a couple of signs that are green, which are, obviously are not red or white. And I'm not entirely excited about introducing another color into the signscape here. So I don't know if the Health Express could be in white, and then the urgent care underneath. And again, that urgent care probably needs to be tightened up a little bit so that it fits between the piers there. Right now, it looks like it's going over the edges of those piers. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I think my current feedback is that I think we need more accurate drawings, because it is deceptive. Both your logos your urgent cares are 24 inches high, but they're 2 different lengths, 21 feet and the other one's 33. So although on the right side, bottom right hand corner, the text looks the same, but your lengths are different. So I'm just questioning how this is all going to, work itself out, once it's finally, installed. I do think this is a great use for the building. I do support signage on the building, but I think we need, some accurate drawings here to really approve or not approve, because your height at 24 inches it's probably a utility brick, and there's 6 of them. So it probably is 36 inches, or, I'm sorry, 24 inches between the 2 soldier courses that are, within the detailing of the building. But the length of 33 feet is far too long, in my opinion. So the one on the front of the building, I support having it in the center of the building itself over the front doors, but I think it needs to be reworked so that it aligns with the length of the canopy and the brick detailing of the building. And then on the side, you have the same detailing. So the Health Express, I think, needs to either the urgent care needs to go down in size so that you can fit the Health Express and the urgent care to coordinate with the detailing of the building. I would also give the same feedback to Ms. Anderson or have the same question. Could the Health Express be changed to white versus the blue so that the legibility is better and it coordinates with the requirements of the design requirements of the center?
Okay, I can do that, and we can. I can ask the owner of the business if they want to change the Health Express to white, because they have multi locations, and that's basically their logo. You know, that's what they have on their other signage. And but I will ask them if they would like just to change the Health Express to white, and I will resize. I will send scale drawings for both signs. Just a question, and I have a question about the front sign. You know, like if you just wanted the front sign is a 24-inch by 33 feet. You know, like they wanted a big sign. You know, like on the side, if you look, you know, like they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 awnings, and each awning, I believe it was like 21 feet. And if you just put it really right over the awning, the same size as the awning, it's going to be really, really small for the size of the building. That's why they want it, you know, like the front one to be larger, and that's
I think
why.
the center gets a lot of visibility, and you can see by the other signage, like the laundry building is a great example. You can see that from this storefront and the street all the way down. So I think you're going to receive the impacts that the owner wants, but work with the architecture of the building. We really need to work with the architecture of the building. And I think the two signs that Carl just put up are great examples of how to integrate the signage in with the architecture so it achieves what you want, but also stays within the design standards.
Okay, no problem. You know, like we can resize it down and send it to you guys.
Okay, so I think for personally, I don't know if I can vote on this today, or I would not vote on it and support it without those resized drawings. But I think this is a great use for this building here. We would probably recommend tabling you for today and allowing you to do those scale drawings to come back to us or to work with staff offline so that we can get it to meet the standards of the shopping center and achieve what you need to for your client.
Okay.
We do need your permission though to table you. So do you agree and or do you agree and support that we table you today to give you the time to do the drawings?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. We appreciate that. So with that then, would someone like to make a motion to table? Mr. Strickland?
Madam Chair, yeah, I would move to table this project for future consideration.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. And Mr. Edmond, you can just say it out loud because I see it sometimes late. Sorry about that, or the seconds or the motions. So sidebar commentary. Any further discussion on this?
Yeah, just a question, please. If you know, like after we do the scale drawings and resize the signage and send it back, do we have to come back to the meeting, or it can be just approved by, you know, like looking at the new drawings
By
we
staff?
submit?
So I will let staff answer that, since the initial intent for the center is so that staff would do the reviews and approval. I would say if you can get this within the guidelines, design guidelines for the shopping center, then staff should be able to approve it and not have require you to come back. But Don and Carl, do you have any feedback? Do you agree with that?
Madam Chair, we're happy to work with the applicant on coming up with a solution for both of the signs. And I think if we can work it out on the staff level, if we're satisfied that it's actually accurate and sensitively addresses the building architecture, we can approve it administratively. If that's the intent of the commission.
Okay, Mr. Brundage, you had additional feedback?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just as a matter of process, because there is a motion and a second for tabling, and I'll ask law department representative to weigh in on this. Would we have to take this back and then ask for a new motion for approval by staff and it returns, or what process would we follow on this one, Mr. Roberts?
Thank you, Mr. Brunges. Well, technically, once a matter before the commission is tabled, there has to be a vote of the commission to reopen it, remove it from the table. So it would look like it would have to come back to a regular meeting.
But we've not taken a vote on it. There's only been a motion and there's not been an actual vote on the tabling. Could the commission retract this motion to table?
Oh,
right
yeah.
now, and
I'm
then
sorry.
do a new motion?
Let's do that. That would be the preferred course.
Okay, and what would the appropriate next steps be once we retract that to allow the applicant to work with staff versus having to return here, but knowing that it's not, we're not voting on the current presentation?
I would defer to, I think Mr. Pettit has an answer.
Thank you. I think I do. I would think if we're not going to table it, it would be appropriate to refer the project to staff for final review and approval, with the understanding that if we can't come to a consensus or if there's an issue, we can bring the project back to the commission for action at another meeting. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. Mr. Strickland, before we continue on, did you have additional feedback?
I just, point of order, if we do table this, doesn't the tabling expire after 6 months? And wouldn't it just go away? And wouldn't that allow staff to work with the applicant to approve it at the staff level if it's within design standards for the center? That's my question.
Can I offer another option? If we table it today, and the applicant works with staff to come up with a better solution and something that meets the guidelines, can we just come back in 2 weeks, take the project off the table and have the commission ratify the administrative decision by the staff? Does that work?
Works for me.
Same here. This is Kevin. Don.
Okay, so then just for final point of order, are we good with the motion that's on the table then to table this and
Yes.
move forward?
With the understanding that staff will work with the applicant to get it ready for approval for the next meeting.
I'll add that to my motion to table.
And I will second the revised motion.
Excellent. So we have clarification on the motion and the second related to that. Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Pettit, please call roll and announce the result.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bonesi,
Yes.
Mr. Colicchia,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Edmund,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik,
Yes.
Ms. Trot.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion carries unanimously. The motion to table. Staff will look forward to working with the applicant in the meantime, and we will report back to you about the outcome of that process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Before we move to our next applicant, Director Wong, did you have feedback?
Morning, everyone. This is Director Huang. I just wanted to state for the record that I'm here now. So,
Thank you.
apologies,
Thank you,
my other meeting ran late.
Director. I'm sorry I missed you.
Okay, then we'll move on to our next applicant located at 2915 J Avenue, New Addition.
Good morning to the committee. My name is Antonia Marinucci. I'm the architect on this project. I'm representing my clients at 2915 J Avenue in Ohio City. So you're looking at the front facade of the property right now, as well as the 1896 Sanborn map. As you'll see when we move to the rear of the property, it looks like the front massing has remained intact close to the original, but there have been some modifications to the rear that you will see. And our proposal is a technical addition, roof modification. We are not increasing the floor plate. We're working with the existing floor plate and proposing a modification to the roof lines at the rear so that we can achieve appropriate head height for livable space. Next slide, please. Again, these are looking at the front and side facades from J Avenue. Next slide. And then this is looking at the rear. The areas of intervention, or I guess what you're looking at right now is that you can kind of see the main double height or story-and-a-half massing of the property. And then there is a one-story addition that is currently like a laundry room rear entry where you see those two double hung windows closest to us. And then off to the left of the photo is kind of a like Three Seasons sort of sunroom situation. Those two rearmost elements are not going to be modified in this proposal. We're really looking at the back side of this kind of hipped shed situation. It's a lot of roof lines coming together. Next slide. I included the floor plans just for context and reference to sort of show that we aren't increasing we aren't increasing any of the floor plate. We're just modifying those kind of bizarre combination of roof lines so that we can achieve appropriate head height. And essentially the goal of the renovation is to add a second ensuite bath to the existing primary bedroom, as well as retaining a hall bath. We're really just kind of using the existing bathroom footprint to achieve that. Next slide. And then this is a roof plan showing those proposals. Again, it's really difficult to understand why or how these roofs currently come together. But what we have is an existing extension of the front gable that's sort of right now cut off by a hip orientation. And then there's a little shed pop up where the existing shower is. And we are hoping to just sort of smooth this whole thing over by extending that front gable all the way to the rear and then adding a little shed, kind of peeling up the back half of that side facing gable with a little bit of a shed roof, again, to achieve that head height. Next slide. And this is how it looks. Existing north facade, which is J facing, there is no change. And then you can see the edge of that modification on that west facade, as well as our proposed window relocation on that west facade. We feel it really kind of cleans up the rear of this property and what is currently just a really interesting combination. Next slide. And again, looking at that rear facade, you can see the elements that we are proposing to remove and extend, as well as that east facade. And you can see our proposed window locations at the rear as well. Next slide. And I did a more a larger scale version of the rear, which is the most obvious location to see the changes and look at the materiality. My clients are extremely good stewards of the historic district and this historic home. They're very committed to particularly to the window restoration effort of the entire house. Right now, we are focusing on the new windows that will be true wood double hung windows that will be recreated by, I believe I have a cut sheet on the next slide, but B&B will be the carpenter and manufacturer. They will be like a full historic replica. And then the rest of the siding will be new to match existing material, exposure and texture, which we believe is the true wood siding. And then the roof will also match existing. So we're just really just going with what is already there. It's because, as you can see, the house is pretty well maintained from a historic perspective. And the existing trim in cell styles recreated on these new window locations as well. Next slide. This is again looking at that. It's the Lexington style historic window from B&B Wood with the Ohio sash. You can see it's pretty impressive. It's a pretty much one-for-one recreation of true historic window of the era. We will not be putting any lights. That's just in the drawing provided by the manufacturer. So ours will be clear, double hung in this proposal. I believe that's the last slide. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation. We'll begin with feedback from the local design review committee.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. Nate Law, Ohio City Incorporated. The design review team saw this project last week. They lost quorum for it, but generally there were no objections to this project. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll then open up the floor for the commission for questions and comments. I'll begin. I think this is a really sensitive renovation and addition. Thank you for being sensitive to the materiality and the owner. I commend them for respecting the detailing of the house and be willing to put in the extra effort and funds to match the detailing of the windows, siding, and even roofing. And I think it's a very sensitive addition. I support it. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with you 100%. I think it is a very sensitive addition. I appreciate that the owners are going the extra mile to make sure that the window details and other details conform with the district. I think this is going to be a real improvement to the house. It's a much cleaner look on the back, and I understand that the second floor functionality will be greatly improved. So this is terrific. I totally applaud your project.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Any other feedback from the commission?
Director Huang, echo everyone else's comments. Well done.
Thank you, Director Wong. Other questions or comments? Or would someone like to put forward a motion? Mr. Edmond?
I'll move that the project be approved as submitted.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Mr. Benazzi?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Mr. Pettit, please call roll and announce the results.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bonesi,
Yes.
Mr. Colicchia,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Edmund,
Yes.
Director Wong, Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik,
Yes.
Ms. Trot.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
Excellent. Well, thank you. We look forward to seeing your project progress.
Thank you all.
We'll move on. Thank you. We'll move on to our fourth applicant, located at the Syrian Garden, located at 1191 Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. The public art installation for Front International 2022. Mr. Pettit, you have your hand up before we start.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to let the commission know that the next two projects are part of the same overall plan for Front 2020. The first item we will be acting on today for a certificate of appropriateness. The second item is here just for concept review. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Fred Bidwell. I thought I would start with a very quick review of what Front International is, and then we can jump into these two projects. Just to remind you, this is part of Front International 2022, second edition of Front. Next slide. Front is a region-wide, season-long contemporary art triennial exhibition that was premiered in 2018. It happens in neighborhoods across Cleveland, but also Akron and Oberlin. The mission of Front is to generate new economic activity through arts tourism in our region, to enhance the brand of Cleveland and Northeast Ohio as a cultural and intellectual hub of national and international repute. And through our efforts, develop an even stronger, more vibrant and sustainable creative community, partnering with many of the most important cultural and educational institutions in our region. Which we think is particularly important coming off of 2 years of the pandemic, where those institutions have taken some pretty hard hits. So this is a great way to reintroduce amazing assets of our community to back to the community and to the world. Next slide. Front is based on a collaboration with our presenting partners, the museum and educational institutions of our region, a huge asset for our community. Next slide. It's a 3-month-long exhibition. So the first project that we'll be presenting is a temporary project. And it features contemporary art from artists from around the world and also from our region. Next slide. It's a big effort. In 2018, we featured 130 artists. There were 28 venues, over 400 works of art across 3 cities in Northeast Ohio. Many of the works are new commissions developed specifically for the spaces and places that they're shown in. Next slide. This is an effort that brings many people to our community. In 2018, there were over 250,000 visits to Front sites by over 90,000 unique visitors. Next slide. It really was an international cultural destination. Over 30,000 visitors in 2018 came from outside of our region, flew to Cleveland, and many of them from outside of the country. We counted more than 25 nations represented by visitors. We hope to top that in 2022. Next slide. And this is a project that is fully engaged in our community. I'll remind you that a major project of 2018 was work that we did in collaboration with the Famicos Foundation and Cleveland Foundation to restore and reactivate the Madison on East 105th Street. It was the location for our artist residencies during 2018, and it continues as a cultural facility as part of the revitalization of East 105th Street today. Next slide. Front is very much metrics driven. Our 2018 edition created over $31 million in economic impact as measured by Cleveland State University, and over $38 million in positive public relations value for our city and for our cultural institutions. Next slide. So Front International 2022, our second edition, delayed 1 year by COVID, but just in time for the recovery. Next slide. Our show title is Oh Gods of Dust and Rainbows. Next slide. And that's based on a poem by Langston Hughes, who, as many of you know, spent his formative teenage years in Cleveland and returned often to Cleveland, doing many of his important dramatic works premiered at Karamu House. This is a show about healing and persevering through difficulty and finding joy through art and art making. We think it's a very timely theme for this moment in our society, our country, and our community, and we're very anxious to share it with Cleveland and the world. Next slide. So the first project we want to discuss is by the artist Diana Al-Hadid. We're seeking final approval for a 3-month temporary art installation. I'm going to describe the project. With me is Annie Wishmeyer, curator on our team. And if you have any questions that stump me, she can answer them, I hope. Next slide. Diana Al-Hadid is actually an artist from our region. I believe she grew up in Canton, went to Kent, currently lives in Brooklyn, but is very strongly connected to our community. She's had significant exhibitions here in Northeast Ohio, in Akron and in Cleveland, but this would be her first work of public art, I believe, in Northeast Ohio. She's well known for her abstract sculptural work that has a very sort of lacy, diaphanous feeling, very expressive, and I think accessible. Next slide. Our proposed site is the Syrian Cultural Garden. Diana's family background is from Syria, so she is focusing on this site. Next slide. Which is obviously here to honor the heritage of Syrian culture. And she's specifically looking at the fountain, which is framed by the scaled replica of the Palmyra Arch of Triumph, which you see on the right. Let's go to the next slide. Her work would essentially be an intervention on the fountain, which you see here in the center of the photograph. Let's go to the next slide. Next slide. And her inspiration is an ancient water clock that was described by the Islamic polymath Al-Jazari, who cataloged many inventions in the Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices. And one of them was a water clock that is really credited as being as one of the first programmable analog computers, not only told time, but was a way to conduct astrological measurements. This sculpture will actually not function as a water clock per se, but it will sort of quote that sort of visual language and utilize the water of the function of the fountain, but it will be added to the sculptural element will be newly planted jasmine, which is an important plant in Syrian culture, that will be grow throughout the trellised system. I think it'll be very beautiful. Jasmine flower is very evocative and, of course, fragrant. Let's go to the next slide. Here are drawings of the sculpture, which will sit in the basin of the fountain. Next slide. Further detail on materials. Next slide. Here's the work in progress. Next slide. To remind you about how beautiful the jasmine flower is, which will grow over and around this sculpture. We think it's a beautiful and poetic addition, completely congruent with the mission of the Syrian Cultural Garden and Rockefeller Park in general, in that it celebrates the history of Syria. But it also draws attention to Syria's difficult present history. And in a way that I think is very sensitive and provocative. We have the full support of the Syrian Cultural Garden and Cultural Garden organization as a whole. And with that, I'd love to have your comments on this project.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll begin with feedback from the local design review committee. Or do we want to start with Ms. Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll go before Ms. Petrus. Lori Ashik, the Executive Director of the Cultural Gardens Federation, had to leave the meeting this morning. I just want to make the Commission aware that Dr. Khoury, the President of the Federation, supports the project. Somehow this did not go to the Design and Preservation Committee of the Federation, but I spoke with Director Ashik, and we agree that given the temporary nature of the project, that the Federation totally supports the project. She would like to add her congratulations to the front group.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Pettit, for that summary. Ms. Beatrice?
Thank you, Chair. I am in support of this installation. I did have some questions. One were whether or not this is a working fountain or if any water will project through the sculpture. My second question was based on the in progress photos. Are those going to be the eventual color scheme, or is there something being added to that? And lastly, you mentioned, I think you mentioned something about jasmine will grow from the sculpture during the installation. So I just wanted to touch on how that's going to be incorporated.
Annie, can you address those questions for Ms. Petrus?
Sure, I can speak to that. The fountain that's already in place will function and sort of bubble up through the base of the sculpture, but the sculpture itself will not be conducting any water as such. And as you can see in sort of the top blue bowl in this image here, that is essentially going to be a planter for all of the jasmine that will then spill down from upper portions of the sculpture towards the base. And the water that is coming from the fountain itself will help to water the plants and keep them growing and vibrant throughout the run of the installation.
Can you speak to the color scheme also?
Sure. Yeah, so Diana primarily works in a palette of metals and white. So what you see there is the copper structure that she's working with, and then some of the oxidation that's coming through in sort of the greens and the whites. So it's still in progress, and the sort of overall scheme might change slightly, but that will be the end color palette in general.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing the installation.
Thank you, Ms. Petrus. Mr. Edmond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is really, really interesting and cool. And I think that a large part of what makes this interesting is the story and the history and the book of whatever fascinating, ingenious mechanical devices. So will there be some labeling didactics to help people understand that this isn't just an abstract sculpture?
Yes, absolutely. We will be installing didactic material at the sculpture so that anyone just happening upon the installation will see an explanation and background on the piece. We will be publishing a free exhibition guide, which will guide people to this location, and with links to our website, which will also have background on the exhibition, on the installation. And we will be publishing a pocket guide with also a project description, which will be available at front sites. So we will have this project well documented, and it will be a prominent part of the sort of University Circle neighborhood of Front, which will have multiple other locations.
Thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
Thank you. I have a question about the jasmine. Is jasmine a relatively fast-growing vine, or will they be planting mature jasmine vines in that planter? And my second question is, once this temporary installation is removed, is it possible to transplant the jasmine and incorporate it into the Syrian Cultural Garden? Or has anybody thought of that? Or those are basically my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Greg Peckman from Land Studio. I can speak to that. We have a greenhouse that is already growing the jasmine for the installation, so it will be mature and well established by the time that it is put into place, for exactly the reason that you're suggesting. We didn't want it to start out in the sculpture, so it will be big, bushy, and healthy by the time it's put in place. And for certain, if the cultural garden wishes to transplant it after the installation, we would be 100% in favor of that.
Thank you.
I think that would be great because it just continues the story and the life of this installation beyond when it may be removed. I would echo, what is said. I think this is a great installation. I think, the story is the strongest. The design is strong, but with the story, it's even stronger. So expressing that for people to either find, but also just discover, if they stumble upon and discover this also, so that they can understand all the thought that has been put into this installation and design. Mr. Strickland, the additional question or comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think one of my questions was partially answered by the last response. So it sounds like the sculpture will serve as a planter to support the growth of the jasmine. But I wondered if it is physically supported. Is it mechanically fastened to the fountain? And if it is, what are the means to restore the fountain when the temporary installation is removed?
Yeah, I can speak to that, and Nancy Boylan from our staff is here as well, who has been managing the development of this. The sculpture will not be mechanically fastened to the fountain. There, as you can see in the upper right drawing, there's sort of lateral supports that go down and sort of brace it against the edges, and then there is a base plate that will fit around the existing water jet, and that will be weighted down from internally. So the piece will be, fairly substantial with its own weight, but it will also, we'll have some sort of sandbags or something else that's going to hold it down in place. So we are very sensitive to the, integrity of the fountain. So we're not penetrating or touching the fountain itself with any mechanical fasteners.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Strickland. Any other questions or comments, or would someone like to put forward a motion? Mr. Edmonds.
I move that the project be approved as proposed.
Thank you. So we have a motion to approve as presented. Do you have a second?
This is Director Huang. I'll second it.
Thank you. We have a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Anderson?
I'm sorry, I inadvertently raised my hand.
No problem. Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Pettit, please call roll and announce the results.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bonesi,
Yes.
Mr. Colicchio,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Edmund,
Yes.
Director Wong, Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik,
Yes.
Ms. Trott.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion carries unanimously.
Excellent. Thank you. We look forward to just one question I forgot to answer. What is the timeline for installation?
Greg, can you help me on that one?
Yeah, sure. We're looking at the front opens the 14th of July, so we'll be doing the installation probably within the first 2 weeks of July.
Excellent. Very exciting. We'll look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our certificates of appropriateness. We'll now move on to concept plans. And just a reminder that we will not be taking votes on the next two applications, but giving feedback. And you're welcome to continue on.
Thank you. So the next project I'd like to describe is monumental public artwork that we have proposed by the world famous painter Julie Moretu for the Standard Building, which is on Public Square. We're seeking your input and feedback today. This is an extremely ambitious project, and we're being very thoughtful about going to all stakeholders for feedback as we proceed through the creative process and production process, which we can conclude in the spring or summer of next year, not this year, even though this is a front project. Let's go to the next slide. I should say before I jump into talking about Julie Moretu's work, this is a continuation of a long-term initiative by Front to create significant museum quality abstract paintings, murals in downtown Cleveland in the area between Public Square and Playhouse Square. We initiated this project, which we call Canvas City, in 2018 with three major murals, one by Donald Odelio Dita, one by Julian Stanzak, and one by Kay Rosen. So this project by Julie Moretu would be a continuation of this long-term initiative by Front. And our ambition is pretty modest. We just want to make downtown Cleveland the world's largest exhibition of museum quality contemporary abstract painting in the world, which we think would be a destination for our city year round, not just in the every 3-year editions of Front. It's my great pleasure and privilege to be able to talk about Julie Moretu. Julie Moretu is, I think without exaggeration, I can say most critics would call her America's most important painter, living painter today. Julie is from Ethiopia, where she spent her early years. Her family fled from Ethiopia, the conflict in Ethiopia, when she was a teenager. And she grew up in Michigan and completed her education here in the United States. She currently lives in Brooklyn, New York. Julie is an abstract painter who is lauded around the world. She in this past year has been celebrated by a mid-career retrospective at the Whitney Museum of American Art, which then traveled to the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis and the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, widely praised. She is known for her very large-scale abstract paintings. Next slide. Actually, I should say a little bit more about Julie, just to give you a sense of her work. Her work is, although it's abstract, it's always based in reality. She's a very socially engaged artist, very interested in histories, both the past and the stories of the present. So her paintings are very layered. She starts with extensive reference material, city plans, architectural plans, diagrams, drawings, photographs, writings, and builds her paintings up from that reference material. The final product is very abstract and energized by her very expressionistic personal painting style. But there's always a basis in history for her work. And as I'll explain later, this will be important for this project. We have targeted an incredibly important location for downtown Cleveland, the Standard Building. We have done this is a project that we've been working on for almost 3 years with Julie. This conversation started as we prepared to have Julie participate in this summer's Front presentation, where she will have a major exhibition at the Cleveland Museum of Art, where she pairs work of her own with items from the museum's legendary collection, which she has selected to be shown with her work to show her inspirations. This is a first time ever for both Julie and for the museum. The idea that a contemporary living artist would actually intervene with the museum's collection and pick works from it is a breakthrough for the museum, and I think will be an incredibly engaging exhibition this year. But from that conversation, we introduced Julie to, next slide, this site, because we had in mind our long-term Canvas City initiative. And we asked her if she would consider creating a work for this absolutely monumental wall. Let's go to the next slide. As you can see, this is on the Standard Building, which has been beautifully restored by the Weston Company. It stands behind Old Stone Church and at the literally the front door of Cleveland Public Square. This is a wall that was never intended to be there. Obviously, the original idea was there would be another building of equal height next to this, next to the standard building. Clearly, that never happened and never will happen. And that's created this sort of blank void at such an important location of the city. It's an amazing privilege for us that Julie is willing, has embraced this site. And she has done that for several reasons. One is because of its obviously dramatic size. This would be her first work of public art. It would be the largest work she's ever done. I dare say it would probably be the largest work of public art, perhaps between New York and Chicago. But more importantly, the location of this site, the history of it, the setting with Old Stone Church in the foreground. She's particularly intrigued with Cleveland's history as the terminus for the Underground Railroad. The fact that you look north towards the lake as you see this wall. She actually is considering the word portal as the title of this wall. She almost sees it as potentially a portal to freedom. Julie, this will be a labor of love for Julie. Just to give you a sort of sense of sort of the scale of her practice, her latest auction record in New York from last year, she's painting of hers sold for $6.3 million. Although this is a very expensive project and the most ambitious project that Front has ever undertaken, and I dare say the most ambitious work of public art that the community has undertaken, it's an incredible privilege for us that she's willing to work on it, because as ambitious as this project is, a painter at Julie's level doesn't need this for commercial reasons. This is truly something that she cares about and wants to engage with the community on. Shall we go to the next slide? Here's a drawing of the project and the proposed mural location. I think you'll hear that there is a history of sign painting on this building, but at the top portion of the building. And those signs were purely for commercial purposes. I think the kinds of paintings that this board would never approve. And although there's no precedent for a painting, obviously, on the proposed location on the wall, I would just point out that there was never a time when anyone planned for this to be a blank wall facing Cleveland's most important square. This is literally a once in a generation opportunity to have a world-famed artist create an historic new work of art for Cleveland at this incredibly important location. And so with that, I think I'll stop and ask for your questions and comments.
Hey, Fred, I don't know if you want to take a second to talk about how we're going to do this with our partners and the sort of technical approach.
Yes, thank you, Greg. As I said, the development of this project has been almost a 3-year process, which first started with a sort of conceptual of ideas, like artistically, is there a strong concept here? And the artist and our curatorial team heartily agrees with that. We then sort of attacked the idea of, like, how is this physically possible to be done? And our team has worked very closely with Julie's studio on exploring a number of different options, different vendors and different techniques. For instance, could this be done digitally? Could this be done on, could this be done on a substrate and then attached to the building? We've explored all of these options and have finally landed on a production partner for this project, which we think will be brilliant. And that partner is Colossal Media out of Brooklyn, New York, a literally the most respected large-scale commercial mural production company in the United States, famed for its hyper-realistic renderings of photographs, often photographic material, often intended for commercial purposes, but to incredibly high standards. And this is a company that was founded about 10, 15 years ago, actually specifically in reaction to digital technology, because they felt that the new digital technology did not come up to the highest standards, both in terms of color accuracy, brilliance, permanence, and so Colossal has had this incredible, built this incredible portfolio of large-scale work. All of their work is completely hand-painted by master painters who are trained through a European-style apprenticeship program, using specialized pigments and paints that have that are extraordinarily durable and long-lived and strikingly brilliant. The artist and her studio are thrilled with this partnership. We have approached Sherwin-Williams who has volunteered to help us with the technical work in terms of the surface preparation, priming, as well as protective coating for the mural. Our agreement with the building owner and the artist studio is that this would be a 10-year commitment, where we would essentially warrant the condition of the mural for 10 years, be responsible for its proper condition. And then at the end of the 10-year period, we would have the option to renew that loan, with again taking responsibility for ensuring the proper condition of the work, or failing that renewal, it would be our responsibility to return the wall to its original condition, paint the mural over. We believe that the community will embrace this mural and will want to keep it long term, but wanted to know that we would have built-in checkpoints to ensure the proper condition of and have a mechanism to restore the mural if there were damage. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Director Wong.
Thank you, Fred, and thank you to Land Studio for just a wonderful presentation. I think every time I hear it, I get more excited. I believe this theme of Portal to Freedom is a beautiful one. And I think given our history and context in Cleveland with regard to wanting to move towards freedom, our context is a place of the Underground Railroad, as well as this interesting play of Portal with regard to Tower City and people emerging from Tower City, which is kind of a portal in itself, and thinking about, how this particular work of art would present itself as you make your way into public square. I believe that the way that she is working with the Cleveland Museum of Art's collection with regard to historic object and her modern contemporary art is kind of a metaphor for this larger proposed project where you have the old stone church as this historic structure object, and then you have this fine art behind it. So I think that's a really interesting interplay and a continuation of her work at the museum. You know, for me, I'm very supportive of arts and culture, and I believe that this wall is asking for public art, and I believe that with her fine art and you know, her fine arts take, it'll be a really well done site-specific project. So I definitely will vouch for this project and vouch for Colossal Media and the application that they'll be able to work on with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wong, and I think your comments are very insightful. I'll also point out there's a connection with another very important public work of public art just a block or two away, Isamu Noguchi's sculpture at the Justice Center, also titled Portal.
Excellent. Thank you for the feedback and that additional information. Before we move into the commission's questions and comments, will Mr. Pettit, you had some feedback for us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to report that the Downtown Flats Design Review Advisory Committee reviewed this on June 2nd, and the committee recommends approval unanimously and enthusiastically.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Also here today is Tara Petrus, and Carl Brunges also has some slides to put the wall into historic context too. Thank you.
Why don't we start with Mr. Brunges and then we'll go to Ms. Petrus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As mentioned, this does have a history of having the large painted sign. This is the rear of the building. There was also, as you can see, formerly a row of windows behind the illuminating company building as well. We've had various photographs showing that large signage that had been approved probably long before signage guidelines were put into play. But this section of the building that the mural is being proposed for has been unpainted for the entirety that it's been standing. There are still historic tax credits in play at this point. They are still within the 5-year look back period, which ends on May 9th, 2023. So the painting of the mural would not be able to start unless an amendment to the current agreement with the state and federal government are amended.
I will note that it is our plan to begin painting after those credits have expired.
Okay. So just want to have that in perspective as well. So part of what it needs to be considered is the visual impact of the mural on the church, and is the mural appropriate to the location? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brunges. Ms. Petrus, before we move into the commission, did you want to give your feedback?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Actually, Joyce, the director, and Mr. Bidwell echoed a lot of what I was going to say. I just wanted to add that I'm also excited about this project. Again, this wasn't intended to be a blank wall, as Mr. Bidwell said. And I think that the juxtaposition of the contemporary art with the historical built environment is appropriate, is done in other cities. It can be done beautifully. And I think it would take a very drab and uninspiring wall into something that makes a beautiful backdrop for the church, as well as the story behind Julie's work and the work she's doing with the art museum. And I think it was very intentional. And I believe that obviously with art, you can't please everybody, but I believe there will be more of a positive response to having this beautiful mural behind this beautiful church, then there would be negative. And I think it's a great opportunity to get up to speed with other cities as far as what they're doing with public work on large campuses such as this. And I think it's a huge opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Petrus. All right, we will open up the floor for questions and comments from the commission. Mr. Edmond?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bit of a personal note, but I first saw Julie Maritu's work at the Carnegie International in, I think it was 2004, and I was absolutely blown away. And, you know, as you know, there's a lot of stuff going on at the Carnegie International, but this really, you know, her work really shone above everything. And I don't need to, I guess, go into what makes her work so brilliant and compelling, but I couldn't be more thrilled about this. You know, there will be a lot of stakeholders, and as Tara said, you can't make everybody happy, but I hope that she will have the latitude to realize her vision on this. And I want to just applaud the ambition of getting an artist of this caliber doing a work of this size in this location. I think, you know, sometimes we sort of have these half measures or plans that don't get fully realized. And I think that bold aesthetic visions like this with a long-term view of the quality of art in Cleveland is really, really to be applauded. And I couldn't be happier. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edmond. Mr. Trosik?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank Mr. Bidwell and his team as well. I'm very excited about this project as well. I think that huge canvas, if you will, that is there in Public Square, plus the Sherwin-Williams building coming up to the west, that to the north, is really going to transform, I think, how we experience Public Square going forward. I also appreciate very much the discussion about going forward, the 10-year commitment, the responsibility for the mural, 10 years, and then the contingency plan for if that relationship is not going to go forward, of restoring it back to the original base of the building with painting over it, if you will. My question, I think, is, and again, this is a concept plan. This is for our review. This is not anything that we'll be voting on today. But I guess my question for Mr. Pettit and or our legal counsel is, when this does come for a vote, is this vote, is our decision going to be whether or not to permit the mural on this particular location? We can't regulate the content of it or how it is, but will the decision ultimately be made whether or not to allow a mural period to be placed on there? Is that what we're going to be deciding? Because I think it's a wonderful concept. I'm very excited about it, very supportive of it. But I guess I'm just trying to figure out what we will be approving when that time does come.
Well, this, Kevin, Mr. Tarasik, I think the simple answer is it will be approving a mural at this proposed location.
That's what I thought it was going to be.
Right. And, you know, the details of which, you know, I haven't thoroughly reviewed. Mr. Pettit and Mr. Brundges might have a more fuller answer, but I think Ray, you're right on what your line of thought.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to be clear as to what this commission is going to be approving. That we are going to be approving. I believe it's within our purview to approve. And again, this is your position with the commission, not mine. But my understanding would be whether or not to permit a mural, any mural, on this location, as well as perhaps additionally set some parameters as far as the maintaining of that mural, the restoration of the building back to the original, but certainly not the content of it. I mean, with a project of this scale, I personally think it's that we're clear on all of that going forward on what we're doing. It's a monumental project. Again, I'm 100% supportive of it, but I just want to be clear that what we are going to be doing and what the responsibilities are going to be going forward with this project because of the size and the scale of it. So, thank you.
Mr. Pettit, do you want to update us on I know our typical, the things that we can and cannot, give feedback on, but go ahead.
Thank you. I would just echo what Mr. Roberts indicated. Our charge here is to determine the appropriateness of any changes to this location, to this part of the building. We have to be very careful about getting into content when we're reviewing works of art. We can't design review the mural. We can't change the colors. Let's add more background to it. Let's make it more three-dimensional. That's beyond our purview. We're here to determine if this location is appropriate. Now we can make suggestions and comments about how it fits on this wall, how it respects the architecture of the building, but ultimately we're not. I think in the end we need to see the concept. We need to see the final work of art, but we have to limit our review to how the mural interacts with the building and is it appropriate for this location.
Mr. Trosek, did I answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. I'll give my feedback now. I mean, I think just trying to stay focused on what we do have, purviews, what we just reviewed. I think the location is exciting because it is such a blank canvas for so long and does really just ask to have something installed here, in my opinion. I would like to, as you do come back, to understand more of the exact configuration of the mural and how it's going to interact with some of the architectural details on that blank facade. So although it's blank, there are the windows, there are some vertical and horizontal details of the wall, as you can see on both sides and across the top. So what the exact, how that's going to interact, I would favor to stay inboard of all of those details with this, since it is such a large canvas. Giving a little breadth to the edges, I think would help to respect those details. And what's the approach with the windows on the left side of the image on the screen. The application, I think, is also, I am torn on. I do, looking at the group you're working with, they have amazing work. It's beautiful. But the paint on this brick that has just been so painfully restored back to its original condition, or concrete, I can't actually tell. It must be brick because of the age of the building. Yeah, it's brick. And how that's the permanency of the paint there versus other installations where they have done either a frame with the mural that can be taken down in time, or a vinyl that can be removed that doesn't damage the brick. That would just be my one feedback. I think since this has been such virgin brick for so long, that's my one reservation of this. But I think I'm in support of a mural here, but as you come back, I'd love to understand more on the exact dimensions and how it's going to interact with those details of the building. Because less is more in this one, I think, due to such a large area that we have to work with. So that is my feedback. Do we have additional questions or comments from the commission? Yeah. All right. And does the applicant feel like you? Oh, go ahead.
This is Director Huang. I wanted to just speak up and say if there are folks that don't believe that this is an appropriate application on the wall, I think it would be good to receive that feedback now, as Front will be making a financial investment in the conceptual development for this. And so I think it's just helpful to hear the feedback, or concerns, I should say. Maybe that's the word I should use now.
Ms. Petrus?
Thank you. I know that the front team had explored other ideas of application to the building. For me, I would prefer to see paint versus applied vinyl, just because the paint has more permanence than a applied vinyl would. And again, if they needed to, they could restore the wall back to a white painted surface if they had to. But I think logistically and for longevity, that the vinyl probably wouldn't be the best option. And I don't think the artists would want to work in that medium either, from what we understood before.
Thank you for that feedback. That's helpful. Ms. Anderson.
Is the wall currently unpainted brick? Is it painted brick? It's a little hard to tell in this photo. And do we know that what the surface of the wall currently is?
It's unpainted brick.
Do we know what medium that could be applied here would be, let's say, the best medium for the artwork, which also would have the least amount of impact on the surface of that building?
Yeah, maybe I'll speak to that. This is Greg Beckham at Land Studio. Given the scale of this and the complexity of this project, as Fred mentioned, we've explored several different options, paint being one of them. We also went down a road very far with the folks who did the installation of the I guess we call it the LeBron banner over on the building on the other side of Superior, which is probably the closest thing in scale to this. We dismissed that along with the building owner because the amount of hardware and the extensive penetration that would have to go into the building to support a frame to support something of this scale at this, I mean, obviously this is quite high up in the air. The wind loads and things are extreme in this location. And so we dismissed that because of the amount of, the amount of potential damage that we'd actually do to the building itself to install something of that scale to cover this area. We also looked at a heat applied vinyl approach to doing this. The lifespan of something like that in this area is, it's maybe a couple of years at best, especially given the scale of this wall and the exposure to it. So paint really is the best solution for this condition. And as Fred mentioned, Colossal, this is what they do all over the world, and they're truly the best at it. You see a lot of some of their examples, most of their examples are commercial, but they also do a tremendous amount of work with national and international artists. So we have a high degree of confidence in them. And we have been working with Sherwin-Williams to come up with, really the best from, the mural paints, and what's available out there today is, these things have lifespans that are, well beyond the 10-year period that Fred has negotiated with the building owner. So we think that this is, given the conditions and the scale and the complexity of this site, paint is the best application to go with.
Thank you. I just want to add to my comments that, this is a wonderful thing for the city to have such an important contemporary artist using this as a canvas for very important work. And I do look forward to seeing Julie Moretu's exhibition at the Cleveland Museum of Art and becoming more familiar with her work there. And this is a very important site. We have this wonderful historic building, the Standard Building, which was the first skyscraper built by a union, the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Tradesmen. So it's a very important building, and it has a gorgeous, delicate terracotta facade. So I really do want to be very certain that whatever is applied to the south side of the building is, going to maintain the integrity of the building. Any concern? It is a south-facing wall, and it's going to get a lot of weather, a lot of sunlight. Any concerns about how this mural will weather? If you could address that, I'd appreciate it.
Greg, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we're experiencing, and I would say at our office, we've done, probably more murals in the last 2 or 3 years than that the quality of the materials and the technology of paint now is really quite advanced. If this were, I do think that your point about it being a south-facing wall, it's going to have a lot of exposure. I think the good news is the building owners did a great job with the restoration of this wall when they restored the building. So from a kind of quote blank canvas standpoint, this is the best surface you can possibly hope for. It's ready to go. We will have Fred mentioned we working with Sherwin-Williams, particularly on the base coat, what goes on here before the artwork. And that is really what sets up a mural for longevity and sort of the integrity of the piece over time. There are coatings that can be applied to it that deal with protecting against UV as well as vandalism. Thankfully, the vandalism is not an issue in this location, given how inaccessible it is. So I think that the combination of having the folks at Colossal who have done these things of large scale, all over the country and all over the world, and then really being able to rely on Sherwin-Williams as a partner to help guide us from a technical standpoint. I think we have the best possible team assembled to get this right. But it is paint and it has a lifespan. But I think that we've got an agreement with the property owner that allows us to evaluate the integrity of the piece over time. I don't think any of us, who are part of the project, or you guys as members of the commission, want to see this look anything other than completely excellent for its entire life. And that's what we're setting it up for that sort of quality from the very beginning.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Mr. Benazzi, you had feedback?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. For Director Huang, given the financial investment of this, we want to get everyone's sentiment, and I echo everyone in that I couldn't be more excited to see this. I'm a lover of the arts. I collect art. I get the joy of seeing the Julian Stanvik mural every day when I drive home from work. It's truly like the highlight of my day. But I also echo what you, Madam Chair, said, which is that there is faint detailing on this facade. It's not a truly blank canvas to work with. And so kind of the respect of, because there's actually an interesting amount of history that comes with this blank wall, right? The ambition of Cleveland can be seen in this wall with what was expected to be the growth, and then the growth ultimately, didn't happen. But the history is there, and I think continuing to layer those stories on top of each other is just going to be such a fantastic opportunity. And it's truly amazing, just, to everyone involved to be executing something of this scale. I don't even think anything in New York is of this scale. If I'm like going through my mental map of murals in Manhattan, and I can't even think of something that is a 200-foot tall mural. Of course, New York's a different scale, so my brain might be off, but I'm just beyond thrilled to see this keep moving forward. And Detroit, you are right, Director Huang. I forget about that. So I just wanted to express my sentiment and my support and congratulations for the team involved, but also the delicate care that I think we'll all take moving forward to make this truly the most excellent new addition to the skyline that it could be. But that's all. I'll keep it short. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Venezzi. Mr. Brundges.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When I first saw this proposal, I'll say I was excited, but I had some concerns. And, you know, we talk about appropriateness and where murals go and history and what we were supposed to put on different surfaces, unpainted brick, painted brick. And I brought up the photographs of where the signage used to be for a reason, that there is that history of painted brick on this facade. And in my opinion, had they come to us with a proposal that was putting the mural only in that location, I think this would be an easy, no problem, because there is a history of it there. Now, some might think it wouldn't look good all the way high up there, but that's fine. But like you said, there's details here, there's unpainted brick. So I had concerns. And when we talk about returning it or after 10 years and returning it, this needs to be reversible per the Secretary of the Interior standards. So it wouldn't be a matter of, oh, after 10 years, we're going to paint over it. The paint should be all removed. If you are talking about a truly reversible condition to get back to unpainted brick. So that's something that should be figured into this as well, that might be a consideration to put it truly reversible. But I am excited for this opportunity, and it's going to be interesting to see. So that I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brundges. Mr. Pettit. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to briefly weigh in here. I respect my colleague a lot, and he brings up a lot of great issues in terms of the preservation of this building. We've had some really lively discussions this week about whether this is the right thing or the wrong thing to do to this building. And I'm willing to make the leap of faith. I think this wall is largely blank because of an accident of time. And there should have been a building built in front of it. And thank God we didn't tear down the Old Stone Church to do that. But I also think it's a great opportunity to provide a really meaningful backdrop to the church and the public square. I don't want this to be just wallpaper. I want it to be a real work of art. I hope that, I anticipate that the quality will justify the leap here and the investment. We've seen a lot of proposals for this wall over the years, and none of them actually came to fruition, including banners and billboards. I think it's great that we have, as a city, are considering putting a piece of high quality art on this wall. As Mr. Bidwell said earlier, it's not just a commercial enterprise. I think we ought to support that. I think it will say a lot about us as a city, and I'm looking forward to it. Once we get there, I do think that the team needs to, when we finally do take action on this, needs to, talk more about the details, the technical issues, so that we're all aware of that and comfortable with it when we finally act on this in the future. That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Mr. Pettit. Ms. Petrus.
Thank you. I believe this is going to be my last comment. I, as well, respect my wonderful colleague, Carl, and we have also had some pretty robust discussion about this wall. One thing I want to talk about is, even though this is south facing and the mural I'm about to reference is east facing, the John Francis Morrill mural at East 9th and Rockwell, that mural was installed in 1969. It's had 2 restorations that were about 25 to 30 years apart, most recently last year, and that was with the help of Land Studio as well. So, and with that style, there's a lot of color blocking. So when it goes into disrepair, it's much more obvious. Whereas Julie Moretu's style is so different. And so, the graphics and art is spread out. So I think even if it began to fade or, it wouldn't be as noticeable as like a color blocked mural such as Mr. Morrill's. But as far as the size, I think that looking at the historical photos with the painted signs, when I looked at those, I thought the signage was a distraction. I think if we put a mural that small on that tall of a wall, it would be a disrespect to the architecture around it, and it would be dwarfed by the wall. And I think that would be more of a distraction than a full wall mural would be. So I think that the church, the wall, public square deserves more than that. So I just respectfully disagree, but I understand the point. You're muted, Julie.
Thank you. And all right, I just want to make sure Mr. Pettit didn't have more to add. So I do not see any other comments today. Does the applicant feel like you've received enough feedback from the commission to continue the development?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for your feedback. This is really very useful to us. This is a project that has got a more than 1 year path to completion. We really look forward to bringing this back to you with all the detail that you've requested, which I think is very appropriate. And we're just very excited and grateful for your support. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing you back. We'll move on to our last, I believe it's our last applicant. Yep, our last applicant, located at 3802 Clinton Avenue, restoration.
Hello again to the committee. This is Antonia Marinucci again. I'm the architect on this project. And also on the call is Ben Trimble, who is here with Ohio City Inc. This property is currently in a state of abatement from a nuisance status. The long-term owner passed away, I think about 3 years ago. And Ohio City Inc. is, I believe the term is, they are the grantors of the property right now. And Andrew Hartnett is acting as the general contractor as we work to stabilize and abate the nuisance status of this property. It is at the corner of West 38th and Clinton Avenue in Ohio City. It was built in 1870, known as the Thomas Axworthy House. It has a bit of a unusual history. Thomas Axworthy apparently robbed the city of about $10 million in, I think, 1880, and then fled into the wind. And also, this is a funny note, sent a letter apologizing to the city several decades later, but was still never located. So he built this house for himself. And so it has a little bit of a notorious history to it. The house next door to it is somewhat of a fraternal twin. You can see through the Sanborn mapping how these two interacted. And I think about 10 years ago, or maybe 8 years ago, the house next door did have a substantial fire that did cause damage to this property that the homeowner was, I think, unable to really remedy given his deteriorating health. So the photo you see right now is the latest and greatest. This is the existing condition of the property. Andy has been working over the last year through the court system as well as physically on the property to, again, abate the nuisance status. So what we are looking at today is the strategy for window replacement, color scheme, as well as a proposed rear modification that will allow for more head height again in that attic space. It's very similar to the project I presented earlier this morning. So if you could go to the next slide. Again, the existing conditions. The house is on the north side of Clinton Avenue. So we're looking at the south facade, which is the front primary facade. Of note, the front porch, as you see it right now, was not original to the house. It would have had a stoop according to the Sanborn mapping. But at some point, there was a 1950s era, kind of mid-century era porch added, and then that was again modified to fit the faux Victorian style. So what we're seeing, what exists now is kind of a pretty sensitive Victorian porch, even though it's not the original. Next slide. And then this is looking at that west facade as visible from Clinton Avenue, as well as the west facade from the rear. You can see that it's very close to the house next door, which is that kind of fraternal twin, and that is the property. This is the side of the property that had sustained fire damage from that house fire. You can see that the other house was also restored from that state. So next slide. This is the east facade. The property is a corner house, so we do have primary facade and of course lots of visibility from this east facade. And it does have almost all of the original folk Victorian detail retained. Next slide. This is looking back towards, you can start to see some of that north facade, the rear as well from this angle. Next slide. And then this is the existing north facade, the rear of the property. And you'll see as we go through the presentation that we're proposing some modifications and opening modifications back here. Next slide. So this is the drawings for the front facade, the south. We would love to currently, at some point when I think they had that sort of mid-century porch modification, they put in one of those like triple light windows that we've seen quite a few times throughout Ohio City with modifications of that time. We would really love to restore that front facade to the two existing like large oversized double hung windows that would have been original to the property, matching kind of the window rhythm of the second floor. So that's our first modification to that front facade. Right now, the plan is to, again, in that stabilization effort, is to just repair the porch as it is and replace in kind as needed to achieve that repair work so that the porch is in stable condition. Next slide. And then this is looking at that proposed east facade. You can see we're recommending a combination of double hung 2/2 windows for the main body of the house, as well as prairie windows in those two front and side facing gables. There's an existing prairie window up there that we feel is likely original. So that's where the language for the prairie comes in on that top level. The rest of the house, there are existing 2/2 double hungs at the rear. From what we can tell are probably original. So that's where the language for the first and second floor is coming from. And of note, on that proposed east facade, you can see that 2 of the windows on that first floor, kind of central to the facade, are going to remain existing. Eventually, when the Hartnetts are hoping to take ownership of the house once we get through the stabilization process, they would like to propose a modification to that area of the home so those 2 windows are in workable condition, and we'd like to just keep them as is for now in hopes of a phase 2 down the line. Oh, actually, can you go back one more, Carl? Thank you. Also of note, the rear roofline modification, there's an existing hipped roof configuration at that rear facade, and we would like to take that to a gable, continue the dimension of the gable roof so that it opens it becomes a gable face to that rear facade. And the reason for that is to gain, again, headspace in that attic. So we have a little bit more usable square footage at that rear room in the third floor. Next slide. And then you can see the way that that would impact that proposed north facade. Just continuing the same, it has the existing wood siding. We would continue with wood siding and create an additional window at the peak of that gable. You can also see that we're proposing more openings to that north facade to create just more light and windows looking back into the backyard, mimicking the kind of windows that are there. We're just kind of mirroring over, as well as providing a rear door, as you can see there. And overall, the basis of design for the windows are Marvin brand wood windows with aluminum cladding, and that's consistent throughout. Next slide. Looking at this west facade, we are proposing, as you can see, a decent amount of window changes. This is the facade that is facing the next door neighbor. And the local committee wanted us to revisit some of these window changes on this west facade. But we still wanted to come before this committee for initial feedback on the overall approach that we're trying to take here. So we are proposing that we are filling in some of those windows on the first floor, just because it's pretty much up against a fence line, and would allow for a bit more flexibility in future floor plans for the interior. Next slide. For color scheme, we would like to go with a dark color scheme. What we're presenting here is Sea Serpent by Sherwin-Williams as the body, and Black of Night as the trim color. The local committee also were wondering if we could perhaps lighten up or adjust a little bit of the color scheme so it felt a little less foreboding, was I think the term they used. But we still would like the house to have a darker scheme in general. The roof was replaced, I believe, I think it was last year, and it's just a charcoal dimensional shingle. The roof was an urgent repair needed due to significant damage to the roof. It was not remotely weatherproofed. Next slide. And again, this is looking at the color scheme. Sea Serpent, like I said, Black of Night for the trim and the porch work, and then the simulated divided light aluminum clad wood windows in ebony cladding. Marvin is the preferred supplier. They're also entertaining, I think, a bid from Pella on those as well. I think, is that the last one, Carl? Okay, I think that that's what we have so far. We are asking for concept review today, though if the committee were open to us working with staff on those window changes on the west facade and on the color scheme finessing, in the interest of lead times on the window order, we would ask potentially to just work with staff on those, as long as the committee felt that the overall direction and intention of this stabilizing effort was acceptable.
Thank you for the presentation. Let's start with feedback from the local committee before we move into the question. Do we have a, Mr. Trim, go ahead.
So Madam Chair, I'm sorry, Nate Law, who's our staff for design review, had to step off for another meeting. And just to recognize any conflict up front, we are also a material partner in this effort to restore this house. We actually filed the nuisance abatement action against this house and are working with the Hartnetts and Ms. Marinucci to try to stabilize this house. The owner passed away several years ago, intestate, left no will, had no family that he wanted to step into that role. So we did with the help of our great partners that have already spoken. So the feedback from the local committee, as Ms. Marinucci already mentioned, there was some concern that the color scheme was a little bit too dark, just because it was a little on the darker side. There was one concern about the prairie window, the center pane being a little bit larger square. And then the last one was that the 4 west facade windows that were being removed, the committee would prefer that more of those remain if possible.
Great, thank you for that feedback. We'll then move on to feedback from the commission. Mr. Edmond?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of things. I did want to comment on the color, and actually, I think those are very handsome colors in their own right, but they feel very, very contemporary to me, almost trendy, and at odds with the historic character of the house, which you have otherwise done such a wonderful and sensitive job with, I think, in general. And I should say, you know, I should have said this first, but how great to see such a cool, interesting, and historic and older house, you know, that's in distress being brought back to life in what I think is a thoughtful way. But I would think an 1870s folk Victorian would have, you know, 3 or 4 colors. It would be a little more lively. I'm not trying to make it into a painted lady, but I think something that's a little more in tune with the period would be a more aesthetically durable and appropriate solution for the color. And then the second thing that I wanted to ask about is the trees. Looks like there's quite a bit of trees sort of on the property and in the tree lawn. Looks like there's one large tree that might be in decline or in distress. Yeah, that one there. Some of the street views actually looks a little worse. So I wanted to ask what your plan is for either tree preservation, remediation, landscape in general. Thank you.
Sure. Andy Hartnett has just joined the call. So if Andy wants to take that question, I can say that there was an additional very large tree on the tree lawn that was the city of Cleveland removed because it was physically laying on top of the roof.
I think that's actually
I made sure to update. Yeah, I think that's the one
Okay.
that you probably can see if you look at Greco.
Yeah, that's the one I was
Street
worried
View.
about.
It's already, yeah, that has already been remedied by the city of Cleveland. It was their tree, and part of the reason that the tree had grown onto the house was due to the trimming for the electric lines. So the city of Cleveland already has taken care of that. And I don't, Andy, you can please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe that there are further needs to remove the other tree lawn trees on West 38th.
Yeah, well, I'm Andy. There aren't existing plans to remove any trees. Definitely, there needs to be some tree trimming. The neighbor on the west side of us has requested that we try to trim that tree on that property line as well. We're happy to do work with any committees if they have suggestions, but we'll just work with a local arborist. Nothing immediate besides that major one that was on the roof line.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edmond. Mr. Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, it's particularly exciting for me to see this project come to fruition, because I am the one, as some of my fellow commission members will remember, I'm the one that bought the house next door and fully restored that fraternal twin. And we did a very thoughtful and authentic historic restoration of that house, which I was very proud of, still am very proud of. And Dave and Mary Ellen Saborski bought that house in 2016, and we still communicate on occasion, and they're thrilled to be living in that house. And I'm proud to say that Ben nominated our restoration as an award winner in Ohio City, which we received in 2017 for historic preservation. So I'm thrilled to see this house being restored finally. And to Mr. Edmonds' comments, with our restoration, we did take the commission's recommendation and include a 4-color scheme on the exterior. Excuse me, which I think is time appropriate for the age of this house. And I agree with the comments that the proposed color scheme, I think, looks a little too contemporary. And I think that the applicant should look at a more historic palette of colors and the number of colors for the exterior color scheme. Great to see it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm glad to see intercession on this very important home. It's a corner home, a very prominent corner, a beautiful house. I think there was a long-term owner occupant. It's kind of sad what took place, but I'm glad to see that there has been intervention here. And I totally agree with my fellow commissioners. I see way too many dark gray, black combinations on these new construction as well as renovations. It just is so consistent. And the one thing that characterizes the street is, even though we have a sister house next to this house, is there is such a variety of styles and even sizes of structures on this street. So I think a variety of color choices would be warranted. I also think that there's a lot of very nice subtle detail on this home that needs to be celebrated by using a multiple color palette. So I agree with my fellow commissioners here, but I'm happy to see this come along, and hopefully there hasn't been too much vandalism on the inside, and there's something to work with there. But those are my comments, and thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Ms. Anderson. I would echo, I think my comments have already been said. I do love the sea serpent. I ironically have an 1890s house that is painted this color, but the contrast, I think, with the black of night, I would like to see a little bit more contrast or expression of the details in this by adding additional colors, so that it does really allow the beauty of this house to shine, because they're doing such a great restoration. I think that the fine details are in the colors. So you had, I think this is at the points that's the final related to the restoration. I think I'm in support of everything that's being done. It's just the colors I think still need to be addressed. Mr. Brunges?
Thank you, Madam Chair. From this photograph, there seems to be an older fence still here. Is that still intact? Has that been removed?
The fence has been, except for, I guess, that little piece you can see back there. The fence has been extracted and retained. Andy, do you feel, I'm not sure that the condition of the wrought iron is something that can be reinstalled. I believe it was in pretty poor condition. But it has definitely been retained. Nothing original was dumpstered in that the extraction effort, but we haven't, we will be coming back multiple times. Let's just put it that way too, as we layer in the restoration efforts of this house. Andy, if you have something to add to that.
Yeah, there was a wrought iron fence around the property that we did take out, and it's chained up in the backyard right now. And our intention is to put it back into place. It's not on original fence posts at the time. It was just wired on almost ornamentally. Our intention is to reuse that and restore it.
And I guess to the commission, it was requested about working with staff. Do you have direction on the windows on the interior here? And if you would be comfortable with this going back to the local committee, and if they approve it there, that staff could do an administrative approval after that rather than bring it back here? Or would you like to see this in final?
The materiality of the windows, to me personally, I'm very comfortable with. I think it's a great product that you're looking at. It's just the color and, you know, how you decide to change the details is in the only element related to, or change the colors to, for the overall color scheme of the house is the only thing that I, you know, have hesitation, but materiality and approach of the design I'm comfortable with. I don't know how others feel on commission. Mr. Strickland, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I did want to comment on the windows. And when we did our restoration next door, we did reconfigure both the first and second floors in terms of number and layout of the bedrooms and of the dining room and kitchen area. So we did change the window configuration almost exclusively on the west elevation and to the rear of the house. So the east elevation and the front of the house is south-facing Clinton. We restored the windows in kind in terms of their location, but we did change the configuration of the windows on the west side and in the back of the house to the north. So I understand the reason for that. I'm sure the interior layout of the house is being adjusted as we had done. And I personally don't have any problem with the Marvin windows with the applied architectural buttons, and the change in size I think is appropriate for the extent of the renovations that are being accomplished here.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland, for bringing that up. I would agree with your comment. Since this elevation is so shielded from, you know, the public view, I'm comfortable with the window modifications also. Since the distance between the adjacent house and this one is so tight. So the question at hand is on, do we feel that, you know, they need to come back for a final review, or per the applicant's request, do we feel like we can take a vote on this today and work with staff on the final colors, which Mr. Brun just brought up?
Madam Chair, I would recommend that it just go back to this be done as a concept review here, let it go back to the local committee for final review, and then it would not have to come back here. And then we could administratively approve what the local committee ratifies there. That way they get all the feedback. And if there's an issue at the local committee where they don't pass it, then we can bring it back here as well, which is a standard procedure for us.
Carl, can you review for me what the local committee's comments were relative to the window modification?
Ben, could you read those? I don't have that in front of me right now. You're muted.
Pardon. Sorry, I was muted. Their specifics were that they would hope that at least some of those windows would remain. They didn't give a specific number or, you know, time. And then the other comment was the paint. I guess that's been that has been talked about quite a bit by other committee members.
Okay, thank you very much. So I just want to make sure that the local, if it's just reviewed exclusively by local design review and then brought back to staff, I want to make sure that local design review understands that the commission in general does not have a problem with the reconfigured windows.
Staff can relay that at the next meeting.
And I think the biggest concern, I guess, that our team has too, and just speaking from from the development team, is just the lead time on these windows. So I guess if I'll throw that out to Andy and Antonia. I mean, if we're okay, if for instance the commission was okay with the black windows, I mean, and we're just talking about paint colors, maybe they can look at the other paint colors, which is going to be a little bit farther down the line, but we can at least get the windows ordered if folks are okay with that. Maybe could the commission act on just that, and we could review a final paint scheme later? Will that help with our time frame, Andy and Antonia? We also have to take this back to the court, so we're trying to make sure that we get a scope of work that we can get a final approval on for the court before we order anything also. And so we just don't want to be stuck going back and forth for months to try to get windows ordered, which are a terrible lead time right now.
Yeah, I think windows are 20 to 25 weeks out right now from ordering. And this would help tremendously if we can start framing out where the window openings are for rough openings. The original construction doesn't have, they just have their old window frames set in the casing. So we do need to make some adjustments to the interior of the property to adjust to these windows, which would just allow the process to flow until the windows get here.
Mr. Pettit, do you have something to add? Because I think what I'm hearing is that we should keep this a concept plan only. We are giving we do support the project, but I think the colors themselves need to be presented as a whole, without knowing what direction what elements you may change. If it's the black is going to be maintained and everything else may change, or that I think my personal opinion is that we need to, as staff at least needs to see the full picture of the paint colors, but could move quickly for you after that. So that's my personal opinion, so that we do maintain the process, but try to speed it up by not having you have to come back here. But Mr. Pettit, do you have additional feedback?
Sorry, I was muted. Just that I agree with that approach. We will need a motion. Excuse me. We will need a motion to change the case from a concept to a certificate of appropriateness. But I support expediting this on behalf of the applicant and taking it back to the committee and then referring it to staff. If you're in agreement with that.
I guess I'm confused because that's we're doing concept and going back to the next would be final from the local, but we're giving my understanding of what was stated, and maybe that's wrong, is that we're giving permission to staff to do the final approval of this versus coming back to the commission. But
I'll throw this out there. Do you see that there are any changes needed from what they have proposed today to the building outside of the color scheme?
I personally do not have any, and I haven't heard anyone express anything. Ms. Anderson, if you have something, you can unmute and please just state if there's a architectural.
I don't really have any issues with the architectural elements, and black is an appropriate color for historic windows. So I could move forward with the windows, but I feel that the applicant should come back with the colors to the full commission.
Okay, so then I will add then, since nothing is changing realistically except for the color scheme, since there's another Ohio City Design Review Committee meeting next Thursday, that we just bring it back to the local committee next Thursday, which doesn't affect the timeline except for a week. And Ben, I asked if that's enough time that the local committee could take into what the commission has said, vote on that, and then they could return with colors later on, because that's not part of the whole thing. They can approve the black windows at that point and it just moves on through the process. I don't think that would be too much of a ask, in my opinion. And I'll just throw that out to the applicant if you're okay with just going to the committee next week.
I'm comfortable with that. Andy and Ben, do you guys have a differing opinion there?
Yeah, I'm a little confused though from what we've all talked about, what you're asking though. So are you asking us to go back to the commission to approve what the paint? I mean, we could probably come up with an alternative paint color scheme maybe this week. I don't know if that's possible, Andy. I don't know if you guys have looked at alternatives or I feel
Yeah,
like
we are working on it.
In order to meet the committee's needs, maybe we could probably just do, I'm just throwing things out there, but you could probably do a lighter trim color that might work, that would add more contrast and keep the black windows. And I mean, I feel like adding contrast to these elements would probably satisfy the committee's concerns. And I feel like that's the only big one.
I think the committee's concern was about the windows on the one facade. So they were coming here for concept to have that hashed out a little bit. Now that the commission has weighed in and said, no, they're okay with how it's being presented, you can go back to the committee for final approval, which would be the normal process on concept and then final approval.
Right.
So if we just continue this on and we don't have to take this and turn it into a final approval, you'll just get your final approval next week. And then administratively, we can approve it so you can do the windows, order your windows, and then come finalize whatever final color scheme for the rest of the building would be. I hope that makes sense.
So are we staying concept or moving it to a certificate of appropriateness with that, Carl? I'm just trying to make sure we're clear here. If we've given the feedback, I think everybody understands it. If it's going back to local, is it coming, and Ms. Anderson feels it should come back here to, the commission also, then, I think we've concluded the conceptual plan, and that would be your final approval in 2 weeks. Or are we moving it up and you're recommending that we approve the architectural modifications, and it's just the paint colors that have to go back to local and to here? I guess that's where I'm even confused. I'm sorry.
Don, would you like to weigh in on
that? Yeah, I had the same question. Is based on what you said, Carl, do we need to act today?
Yeah, I don't think we need to act, and we just say this is a concept plan approval, and let's just go through the process.
Yes. Yeah, we don't need to act today. It goes to the local committee next week per normal procedure and have them act.
And then staff would approve some of this stuff administratively, yes, and then the colors would come back to the commission.
Correct.
Are you okay with that, Julie?
I'm fine with it. I'm trying to meet everybody's needs. And if the local feels that they need to see this again, respect that. I think architecturally or hopefully the applicant has heard that we support your modifications here, and we'll continue to support it as we move forward. And I think we can have this conclusion in 2 weeks. Does anyone have any objections to that? So
I have my hand up, so I just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Reinforce that I agree with Ms. Anderson that I think the commission should have the opportunity to review the final color scheme and vote on it, and not have it be approved at the staff level. So as an alternative to what Carl has proposed, I would formulate a motion changing this applicant status from a concept review to a certificate of appropriateness, approving the architectural changes and the window configuration and the black windows, with the stipulation that the applicant come back for final exterior paint color approval. That would be my motion.
So there is an official motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Further discussions? So this will move it from concepts to certificate of appropriateness, and yeah, but with stipulation, applicant comes back with final paint colors to work with the black windows. Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Pettit, please call roll.
And thank you, Mr. Strickland, for putting that into one motion.
You're welcome.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bonezzi.
He's left the meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Kalikia, I think, has left the meeting. Mr. Dryer? Mr. Edmund?
Yes.
Ms. Wong has left the meeting. Mr. Strickland?
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik?
Yes.
Ms. Trott?
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
All right, well, that was a little painful, but we got through it. So we look forward to seeing you again here, for the final paint colors.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Concludes our concept plans reviews, and we'll move on to administrative reports.
I will just report that there is a new historic marker in front of City Hall today, commemorating the career and achievements of Carl Stokes. I hope you all get to see it. It was a great ceremony yesterday, well attended. All the credit belongs to the Cleveland Restoration Society, and I think I'm just happy it was well attended and successful. Other than that, I don't think I have any reports unless anyone has any questions.
Any site visits that we need to be aware of?
We have one coming up in the near future. It's a demolition on Lorraine Avenue at West 98th Street. It still has to be scheduled for design review, so it's not imminent, but that's the only one to keep in mind that I'm aware of, unless Carl, I missed something.
Not that I know of.
Okay. I know we're to the season of summer vacations, and I will not be in attendance, I believe, the next meeting. Mr. Kalikia will hopefully be available and to step in for me. But as people's vacations come up, please let Carl and Don know. All right, and that's, I think, all we have today. So we are adjourned, and we'll see everyone in 2 weeks.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Thank you.